Hello, everybody, and welcome back to British English Pod with me, Lewis. And in this week's episode, we're going to be speaking all about the environment, teaching you plenty of advanced words, phrases, expressions, and, well, having a chat about the weather as well, because it's a classic thing that we discuss all the time around the UK. So, if you're ready, I am as well, and let's get started. To begin, let's kick off with a first easy question. It is, what's the weather like today where you are? I'm in Brussels as usual, and the weather today is quite windy. It's quite blustery. It's quite gusty. These are ways of saying that it is very windy because, as usual, I've just been out for a run and I stopped halfway through my run thinking, the sun is out. It's nice and sunny. I'm sweating a little bit. But then, as I was walking back, I was realizing, it's actually a little bit nippy. It's a little bit chilly, purely because of the fact that it is very windy. And I don't know why Brussels is so windy, because it's not on the coast. So you would think that places that are on the coast would be windier. But for some strange reason, Brussels is a very windy city. And yeah, it's a bit chilly. It is a little bit nippy. And it shouldn't be. We're in summer now. It should be nice and warm. But hopefully there will be another heat wave very, very soon. Now, next question is, what is your ideal weather? You know, what is the ideal weather in your opinion? And for me, the perfect weather is a sunny day, maybe a few little clouds, but not too many. And it should be around 25, 26, 27 degrees tops. If you say tops, it means maximum. So for me, when it goes above 27, 28 degrees, then it starts to be a little bit too hot for me. And many of you listening in very, very hot, warm countries must be thinking, Lewis, what are you on about? What are you talking about? Here in my country, it's regularly 40 degrees, or it's even 45 degrees. So I'm sure some of you are used to hot weather, but I'm not. I can't handle it. In particular, at night, I can't handle very, very hot weather. So, as a result, I would say sunny with a light breeze and 26 degrees is about perfect because with that temperature, I can go to the beach, I can have a swim in the sea. I'm not absolutely boiling or roasting all of the time, but I'm nicely warm. So that is the ideal weather for me. How about you? Let me know in the comments. What is the ideal weather for you? Now, the next question is related to extreme weather. So it is, have you ever experienced hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, landslides, blizzards, any kind of natural disaster? And luckily, I haven't. Phew! Thank God, I have never experienced any kind of natural disaster. Of course, in England, sometimes it will flood, but when it floods, it doesn't flood that often, and it doesn't flood that badly. At least where I'm from, my mum and dad's house is at the top of a hill. So it is absolutely impossible that my mum and dad's house will flood because the water will flow down until it reaches the bottom of the valley. And in fact, I do remember in my town that maybe 10, 15 years ago, there were some floods that affected some of the townhouses, which were next to the river and the canals, because of course, then the banks of the river will overflow and break. And when that happens, then you can have quite serious flooding and water can enter the house. But again, touch wood or knock on wood, as they'd say in the United States, that it never happens. And hurricanes, earthquakes, again, fortunately, in the UK, we don't have very extreme weather, so I've never experienced an earthquake or a hurricane. And I hope it never happens to me. And again, tell me in the comments if you have ever experienced any kind of natural disasters, please let me know. And I can tell you a little bit of a story, which is when I went to Thailand. This was 10 years ago now, almost. And it was a little bit shocking. And it was quite emotional as well, because we traveled around the country and there were sometimes signs of where the tsunami had hit, because there was a huge tsunami in Thailand. I don't remember exactly what year, but I think it was like 2006 or something similar. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. But there was this horrible tsunami that took the lives of many, many people, and they made a film about it. The film, what was it called? I can't remember. Tsunami film. It was The Impossible. The Impossible was the name of the film. And it's a great film, but it's very, very depressing and tragic. And knowing that I'm just looking it up now, it was with Tom Holland. So I think it must have been one of Tom Holland's first ever roles. So, yeah, it's a very, very sad story and it's very moving as well. But when I went to Thailand, you could see these signs of be careful of tsunamis, which thinking about this, ugh, sends shivers down my spine. How about the next question? And this one is, have you noticed heat waves and droughts becoming more frequent, more common? Well, of course, this is related to global warming and related to climate change. And I would say that nowadays, across all of Europe, it is more and more common to have warmer weather sooner in the year. Just a few weeks ago, here we had 32 degrees, which is not very normal. And when you check all of the figures and the statistics, you will see that we are consistently beating the highest temperature ever recorded each month. Now, of course, this doesn't happen every year, but the trend is very clear that the continent, Europe, is getting hotter and hotter and drier, especially in certain areas. So I remember maybe a few years ago, there was a long drought in the UK when it barely rained all summer for like 3 months straight. And this never usually happens. We have heat waves during summer, and we'll have periods where the weather is very nice, but without being boiling or roasting. But usually, if I think back and remember my childhood, my teenage years, spending summer in the United Kingdom, we always had quite a lot of rain as well. So you'd have 1 week of good summer weather, and then the next week would be like going back to spring with spring showers. So I'm not sure if the UK is consistently getting drier, but it is definitely getting hotter. Now, after that, the fifth question. This question is, would you rather spend an entire year with 40 degrees Celsius or 10 degrees Celsius every day? Now, both of these are kind of extremes. 10 degrees isn't freezing, but it's quite cold and it's quite depressing if it's that cold for so many days in a row. And 40 degrees, well, you can't really do anything. And I know this from experience of living in Seville, but when it's 40 degrees Celsius outside during the day, all you can do really is stay inside with air conditioning, with fans, and wait for the temperatures to start to cool down. That's why people go out and have dinner much later. That's why maybe people make the most of the morning more. Because from, let's say, 11 o'clock until 7 o'clock, it's roasting. It's like 40 degrees. And a great plan you can do is, well, stay in the office with air conditioning, or if you have access to some kind of like gym, country club with a swimming pool, then okay, then it's fun. But realistically, you can't do that every single day. So taking all of that into consideration, I think I'd probably rather have just 10 degrees every single day for a year, because at least you can wrap up and put on more layers to be able to withstand and handle the cold weather a little bit better. If you ask me if I prefer plus 40 degrees or minus 10 degrees, then I'd go 40 degrees. That's where I draw the line, I think. And another question. What do you wear when it's freezing, and what do you wear when it is boiling? So freezing, very cold, boiling, very hot. What do you wear? Well, I get hot very easily, but I also get cold very easily. It doesn't make sense, I know. I think it's related to my circulation. But when it's freezing, of course, I will put on a scarf. I'll put on gloves as well. I'll put on maybe a thermal t-shirt to keep myself warm. Then maybe a jumper as well, perhaps even a hoodie. Then a nice, thick, warm coat. And if you've got one of these coats on, well, you don't feel the cold so much. And what I tend to do as well, when it's very cold, is wear 2 pairs of socks, maybe even 3 pairs of socks. Because as I said, my extremities, so my hands and my feet, they feel the cold a lot more than the rest of my body. So that's what I wear when it's freezing. And when it's boiling, well, you don't wear a lot, do you? You wear boxers, maybe swimming shorts, and at most a t-shirt. And on your feet, well, you're probably going to wear flip-flops or sandals. And by the way, in Australian English, they don't call flip-flops flip-flops. They call flip-flops thongs. Thongs. Which is always a little bit confusing for the rest of the international English speaking community. Because thongs, for me and for most people, is a type of underwear that ladies will wear that are very, very thin. These are thongs, like a G-string. But in Australian English, thongs are flip-flops. Did you know? Were you aware of that difference? Let me know if so. Now, let's keep going. I'm going to describe a few landscapes. So I've got 4 different images, beautiful images of different landscapes around the world. I'm going to very briefly describe what I can see. So in the first image, what I can see is a very, very relaxing, calm, beautiful, and striking landscape of, on the right, I can see the sea. And you have some waves as well at the same time. And along this coastal area, you have some sand, some beaches, and lots of rocks as well. Some of these rocks even appear to be small islands. And the terrain seems very mountainous, and it seems very rugged as well, because it's full of rocks, of trees that appear to be like pine trees. And if I look in the distance, you have lots of valleys and ups and downs. And I can't see a single person or a single building along this coastline. So when I look at this, I think that it looks almost like paradise. So I would love to have a walk along this beach. The next landscape, number 2, is completely different. Here we can see a desert. And it kind of reminds me of what I imagine Route 66 to be like, where you can see we have a lovely sunset. So it is dawn, and you can see the clouds that are in a nice orangey, pinky color. So it's a wonderful sunset. I can see lots of cacti along the ground with, again, plenty of rocks. And on this type of terrain, you imagine there might be some rattlesnakes or scorpions. And there are some trees, but I think the majority of these trees are kind of like cacti. And cactus is singular, cacti is plural. And unlike the first image, I would not like to be stranded in the desert. I don't think I'd last very long. The third image is another very majestic and dramatic sight. So what I can see in the center is some kind of lake, or it might even be a river. And in the distance, you can see some snow-capped mountains. So it seems like this is in Canada or Alaska, because on each side of the river or the lake, you can see huge trees full of lots of leaves as well. And it's very, very green. So it looks like very fertile land. And as I said, in the distance, you have snow-capped mountains and lots of clouds. So I imagine it's quite cold in this area. And I imagine you also have some kind of bears that are roaming the lands, trying to fish different salmon, for example. So it's absolutely beautiful, but I don't think I'd last very long here either. And I can't see any sign of human life around here. Now, the last one is an image of, well, the Northern Lights. And the Northern Lights are a term to say the aurora borealis. In English, you can use both, but we use the aurora borealis as a more of a scientific term, whereas in normal conversations, people will say the Northern Lights. So you can see the Northern Lights, which are present around the Arctic Circle, and this appears to be deep within the Arctic Circle, perhaps around Finland, Norway, Greenland, Sweden, I'm not sure. But we have lots of ice, we have water, you have some different islands with rocks, and it seems to be an uninhabited area as well, where the only animals that you are likely to see might be polar bears. But I've never seen the Northern Lights, despite the fact that sometimes you can vaguely see the Northern Lights from areas in the United Kingdom. But I would love to go on a road trip towards Norway to be able to get a glimpse of the Northern Lights. So there we have 4 different landscapes that I've chosen to describe. And let me know which landscape you like the most. I think most of you will probably pick the first one because it's where you have the beach, you have waves, but you also have mountains and trees. So essentially, you have the best of both worlds. Now let's review some more vocabulary related to the weather. And from there, we'll start discussing the environment in a little bit more detail. So some of my regular students who've been taking classes with me for a year will probably recognize this activity because I remember I taught it about a year ago. So on the left-hand side, you've got 10 very, very, very summarized definitions or synonyms of weather-related vocabulary. You have to try to guess the missing words. And this is a reminder, as always, if you would like to take classes with me, either group classes with my British English Immersion Club, where you pay a monthly subscription and get access to one class per week, or you can book private classes with me and we can focus on whatever you want to focus on. So there is a link in the description if you're interested, and if you just want to practice from the comfort of your own phone without having a fixed schedule, you can download my app, English with Lewis. Now, back to the vocabulary. I'm going to say the definition, and you've got to guess the word. So the first one is very, very hot. Very, very hot. I've already used it. It is boiling. The weather in the Sahara Desert is boiling. You can also say roasting, sweltering, sizzling, maybe even more. Number 2 is the opposite. Very, very cold. I've also already used it. It is freezing. It's freezing. So freezing is very cold. Nippy or chilly or cool are ways of saying a little bit cold. Number 3 is pieces of ice that fall from the sky. It's a combination of rain and snow. These pieces of ice that fall from the sky, they are hail, hailstones. It is hailing. Number 4, an overflow of rainwater. This is what I mentioned at the beginning, that sometimes it happens in my town, but not for me because I live at the top of the hill. It is a flood, and the verb is the same, to flood. And some of you might be wondering, Lewis, you pronounced that a little bit strangely. I didn't. The only thing is that I pronounced it with a Yorkshire accent, with a more northern accent. Because in the south of England, they say flad, flad. So the OO becomes an A, flad. Whereas in the north of England, we say flood. So there was a flood. It has flooded. That's a little explanation. Now, number 5, a long period without rain. A long period without rain is known as a drought. Careful with the pronunciation. Drought. It is a drought. Then, number 6 and 7 are both different ways of describing the rain. So if it rains a small amount, it drizzles or it spits. Whereas if it rains a lot, it pours it down, it chucks it down, it lashes it down, it pisses it down. We have quite a lot of alternatives here. Then number 8 is a period of extreme heat. A period of extreme heat is a heat wave. A heat wave. Then the sound of a storm, what you hear if there is a storm, is thunder. Thunder. Then what about the flashes? What you see if there is a storm? This is lightning. And usually we use them together. So we say thunder and lightning. Thunder and lightning. How was that? Easy or hard? I think for most of you, if you are regular listeners, then this is more of a revision than anything else, because all of these words are relatively common. Now, let me answer a few questions, but we can move on from all of these things. And I'd like to focus a little bit more on conservation, pollution, climate change, greenhouse gases, all of these words related to being environmentally friendly. And I'll start with kind of an introductory question. It is, how concerned are you about global warming? In other words, how worried are you about global warming? And it might sound bad, but I must admit, that nowadays, and I'm wrong to think it, I'm less concerned about global warming than I was 5 years ago. I'm less worried than I used to be. But hear me out. Listen to my justification. I'm still very worried about it. I still think it's going to have horrible consequences, and there will be more and more natural disasters. There will be climate refugees, and we're going to have to learn to deal with higher and higher temperatures. But the reason why I say I'm a little bit less concerned than I used to be is just because in many other aspects, the world is in a worse place. So if you have war and conflict and you have more and more inequality, then these things, rightly or wrongly, they take center stage. By that, I mean is people, we have to focus on living in peace before we can start actually worrying about climate change and global warming. If we can do both at the same time, that would be amazing, but it's not always possible. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a story to make it easier for you to think about this. Because of course, if you are unemployed and you don't have any money, you can't afford to put food on the table, your priority is exactly that, to find food, to get a job, and you're not concerned about whether the average temperature is going up by 0.5 every year. So that puts everything into perspective, I think. So when the world is in a very happy, peaceful situation, of course, we are able to focus more and more on climate change and global warming and trying to reduce the effects of this. But right now, as I said, rightly or wrongly, I don't think most leaders and politicians are able to prioritize climate change as much as they could 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the world was more peaceful, so we were able to have more conversations about the sustainability of the planet. Nowadays, unfortunately, other things have got in the way. Other things have taken center stage. So I'm still concerned about global warming, about climate change. I worry in the future what the world will look like. But I think there are many other problems in the world at the moment. So that's my perhaps cynical opinion about this question. Let me know, how concerned are you about climate change? How worried are you about climate change? And of course, I still support being eco-friendly. I support being environmentally friendly. And let's get into that with a few more different questions. But actually, before I discuss some of these questions, another little vocabulary quiz. This one is quite short, and it's just guess the word. So I'm going to give you another definition, and you've got to try to guess the word. The first definition is gases released into the atmosphere. Gases released into the atmosphere are emissions. They are emissions. Next, we have energy from natural sources that won't run out. Energy from natural sources that won't run out. Well, this is renewable energy, of course. Renewable energy, like solar energy and wind energy. The next one is the amount of carbon dioxide produced by a person, a company, or an activity. Confusing. Well, this is your carbon footprint. The amount of carbon dioxide we produce. That is our carbon footprint. Then we have able to continue without damaging the environment. It's able to continue without damaging the environment. This adjective is sustainable. If something is sustainable, it can be sustained. We can continue to do it over a long period of time. Then we have able to break down naturally without harming the environment. Able to break down naturally without harming the environment. This is the opposite to plastic, for example. It is biodegradable. Biodegradable. If you throw an apple core somewhere, well, you are littering, you're throwing your rubbish, but at least it is biodegradable. It will disappear over a long period of time. Awesome. So, there we had some more words and phrases. Now, we're going to finish with some idioms, but as I said, let me discuss a few questions at the same time. So, the first question that I'm going to discuss is, what environmentally friendly habits do you already have? So, in what ways am I environmentally friendly? Well, first of all, I walk everywhere. So, I never drive or hardly ever drive. So, that's me being quite sustainable and environmentally friendly. I also try to avoid buying things that are wrapped in plastic because there's nothing more infuriating, in my opinion, when you go to the supermarket and you see maybe bananas. And these bananas already come perfectly packaged, like naturally, because they're covered in banana peel. So then if I see that a supermarket has wrapped bananas in plastic, I'm not going to buy it. It goes against my principles. And I do the same thing, where possible, with other veggies. If I see that they are wrapped in plastic, I don't agree with it, so I don't buy it. I try to buy these things from a different shop. In what other ways am I environmentally friendly? I try to cut down on the amount of meat I eat. That's another thing, because it is true that if we consume too much meat, then this is not good for the environment. It's not good for the planet. But I admit that there are many other things that I could do to be even more environmentally friendly. Now, I mentioned plastic. The next question is, how serious is plastic pollution, in your opinion? How serious is plastic pollution? Well, you see some documentaries of how much microplastic there is in our oceans, and the fact that if we are eating fish, we are undoubtedly going to be consuming little pieces of microplastics. So I think this is a huge problem that we're not fully aware of yet. And I hate it. I despise it when I'm walking around the city, going to a park, and I see plastic on the floor. I see that people have been throwing things on the floor. They have been littering. Then, maybe 10 minutes away, maybe even less, there is a bin. So everybody should be much better at keeping their own rubbish and waiting to throw it in the bin. So this is something that really gets on my nerves when you see people have littered and they've thrown these things on the floor. But as I said, with microplastics, we do need to do some kind of ocean cleanup to be able to, well, prevent plastic being all over the ocean and try to clear it up. Because I don't know if you've seen any of these videos or stories, but I remember, I think there was a young Dutch guy who set up his own company. And his goal, his vision, his ambition was to try to clean up our oceans and our rivers, our lakes. Because I'm not sure whereabouts it is floating at the moment, but there is essentially a continent of plastic that is all gathered together somewhere, I think, in the Pacific Ocean, and it's just floating in the ocean, sharing the same ocean as dolphins, as sharks, as jellyfish, as salmon. Well, maybe not salmon, but tuna and all of these things. So I think we should try to get behind these types of initiatives to be able to make a big effort to clean up our oceans. Because again, there's nothing worse than going on holiday or going to the beach. And then when you're getting in the sea, you see rubbish. You see maybe cans or plastic bags or water bottles. So I do agree with certain initiatives here in Europe, for example, where you can't take the bottle cap off the bottle. It seems like such an insignificant thing, but I think it is the right thing to do to make these little sacrifices and little changes to be able to hopefully keep our seas and our oceans as clean as possible. Now, another question. Is renewable energy developing fast enough? Is renewable energy developing fast enough? Well, I think this is a cause for optimism. I think this is a reason to be optimistic because China, for example, if you check the statistics, they have started using more and more and more renewable energy. And now most of the cars in China are electric vehicles. And they use so much wind energy and solar energy as well. The same thing is happening in Spain, where Spain is one of the most renewable energy friendly countries in the world. It has a lot of wind, it has a lot of sun, so they are harnessing this geographical advantage to become more eco-friendly with regards to renewable energy. Again, we can always do more. We can always try to speed up this transition more and more. But I do think this is a reason to be optimistic. I think that renewable energy is becoming cheaper and cheaper. So then governments and companies are deciding to focus on it a little bit more. The only thing that is a problem is that as a population around the world, we continue to need more and more fuel. We need more and more electricity, perhaps also because of artificial intelligence. So the downside is that we continue to use a lot of fossil fuels. We continue to use a lot of coal, for example, and a lot of gas. But I think we're on the right track. We are on the right path here. Now, let's go over these idioms and then we will call it a day. But let me know, tell me in the comments, how do you feel about this topic? Are you worried about the future of the planet? Do you think we are making enough progress? Do you believe that it's possible to try to manage and handle the negative effects of climate change? Or are we doomed? And if you are doomed, it means you're destined to failure. So let me share my screen for the final time. And here we've got 7 different expressions related to weather or the environment. The first one is a classic that usually I don't advise people use. It is rain, cats, and dogs. So this is a funny, old-fashioned way of saying to rain a lot. But I would usually say it's pouring down. It's pissing it down. This is more common. Number 2 is lightning fast. Lightning fast. If you describe something as lightning fast, you are saying it is extremely quick. That car is lightning fast. Then, 2 of my favorite idioms that I teach all the time, we have on cloud 9, which is a way of saying you are delighted, you are ecstatic, you're so happy. And the synonym is over the moon. I was over the moon when England won the World Cup. Oops, that hasn't happened yet, but hopefully it will. Next, we have every cloud has a silver lining. And if you say this, what you mean is that something appeared bad, but it turned out to be good. Every cloud has a silver lining. It's kind of the same as a blessing in disguise. It appeared to be bad, but it turned out to be good. Then we have snowed under. If you are snowed under, it means you have a lot of work. You are swamped. You have so much stuff to do. Then we have under the weather, which is when you're a little bit sick. I feel slightly under the weather, a little bit sick. And finally, it is come rain or shine. This weekend, I'm going to have a barbecue. Come rain or shine. It means whatever happens, whatever the weather. So, there you go. Did you know all of these idioms or not? And as always, please remember to leave a like, recommend the podcast to any of your mates who want to improve their English, and I'll see you again in a few days. So, thanks for watching or listening, and see you next time. Bye-bye!